Hello again, my dear students. So for part 3, we're going to analyze and talk about um, education and language policy in Colombia by Usma Wilches. Okay. Um, so before we go any further, I believe that by this point you've noticed that um, a lot of a lot of these texts um, bring some ideas back. These ideas belong to a lot of texts from um, the first term. Okay, so once again, it is important for you to remember that. I'm trying to pair um, some of the ideas that we have already studied. Okay, so we can focus on the new aspects that these readings bring us. Okay, so some key elements and concepts. So um, Usma Wilches in this text does a very interesting questioning about the relevance and, let's say, viability of the National Plan of Bilingualism. That is to say, um, how important, but more precisely, how adequate, how pertinent it is for our context. And we can maybe correlate that to what Guerrero did from a discourse analysis perspective. Okay, we're going to see that they both meet in some places. Um, he also does a historical overview of languages teaching in the territory, which is something that we already studied with De Mejia, right? So that's also something that we're not going to touch in this moment, okay? Um, but back to the National Plan of Bilingualism, it is important to notice that um, the author says, well, we pretty much have asked anyone but ourselves on what a national bilingualism policy should be. Okay? Why? Because he takes a look at the institutions that the government has asked, and you have there the British Council and Oxford University Press and Cambridge University Press, and I mean, not that they are not important, because they are, of course, right? But then, where's the part where we are, when we asked ourselves, um, there has not been, in contrast, right? We haven't had that much participation as think about ASOCOPI, for example, or like the faculties of education of a lot of universities in the country, right? That historically have developed um, language teaching content. Okay, think about Universidad Nacional, Universidad Pedagógica Nacional, um, Universidad Pedagógica y Tecnológica de Colombia. Okay, so we have many Universidad de Antioquia. Okay, we have a lot of institutions here that I personally believe were worth asking for advice. And then, well, these institutions, these foreign institutions, brought with them a, a big amount of standardization, okay, and that goes along with standardized testing. So, like, according to the Common European Framework, the Common European Framework of Reference, this is wrong. I'm sorry. Um, we had to implement in the territory um, tests, such as the IELTS and the TKT, right? The TKT for the teachers. Sorry, this is CEFR, Common European Framework of Reference. There we go. So, and one of the other things that were brought up by the author was that after the labor that these foreign institutions did in or for our bilingualism policy, we pretty much ended up with a very exclusive definition of what bilingualism is for our country. That's something that we have already comprehended. That is that it's pretty much limited to people knowing or being able to communicate both in English and in Spanish. That's our definition of bilingualism, and that it's the predominant one that has a, let's say, motivated most of language teaching programs throughout the country. Um, so that, of course, poses a lot of negative effects on negative groups, as well. They are not going. Sorry, they have wondered. Well, I speak my indigenous languages, and I also speak Spanish. So how come I'm not bilingual? So as you can see, that national plan for bilingualism does not take into account the uh, languages diversity that we have in the country and many other aspects, of course. But we're going to deepen on them as the author of the reading of the article presents them to us. Okay, so we have four major situations, four major moments in the reading. There are that have the most significance right here. Okay, the first one is the he calls it the externalization and internalization of education and language discourses. Um, so okay, here I took the liberty to simplify some of the ideas, and well, we need to think about how the aim of a the National Plan for Bilingualism is, and that is that the conception that we have of the second language that we're learning, in this case English, is that it's going to um, promote or foster a new scenarios for the population, and that is of course oriented to economy and uh, like moving forward or moving up in the social strata scheme that we have right now, because the national plan of bilingualism starts, or better, that plan is pretty much um, you know based on uh, the importance of the country interacting with new economies and the whole thing around globalization. So we ended up fostering competitiveness in the local school system, right? And that implies implementing ideal models accepted by an international community. Okay, why are those in italics here, and like why do I make the quotation, my air quotation marks right here? I do them because there's no there's no really a reference point to say what is ideal. Okay, and the government just like support itself in that decision with what the international community is saying and what it's asking for. And I mean, yes, we do live in a globalized world, and we do need to have some um, you know basic ground to carry out the language teaching, but that that doesn't mean we can just forget the context in which we are immersed, right? And that's pretty much what the government is doing. That's why I'm putting in air quotes, right? And uh, within that title, we also have that language policies development in Colombia isn't organic. Okay, that's pretty much what the author is saying. We have little to none real linguistic comprehension, like real comprehension, sorry, of the linguistic situation, like the language diversity that we have in the country and the linguistic needs that we have. I mean, perhaps we have conducted some studies on the languages that we have, and so on and so forth, but that doesn't make it to the National Plan of Bilingualism. Those studies and those languages that, for example, Instituto Caro Cuervo has documented, right? That is just not included in the National Plan of Bilingualism, and it's therefore excluding um, all of this academic effort, but most importantly, the communities that cannot quite adjust to that plan. Okay. The second big moment of the reading is with, it's called, the author calls it the instrumentalization of language learning. Okay, so um, we as language teaching professionals understand that there are a wide variety of maybe values that that languages have, and that learning a language has. Sorry. Um, so we know that, for example, I mean, the fact that I know and that I can speak English allows me to interact with other people and allows me to make friends and allows me to have, well, personal experiences with uh, people that speak a language different than mine. So that's a very humanitarian kind of um, dimension of a language. We also know that knowing another language uh, allows us to access to new knowledge, okay? That's knowledge that is stated in that other language, right? Just like our class, right? I mean, a lot of what we have studied has been written in English, and it's a knowledge that we are acquiring thanks to our um, capacity to understand English. Okay, but what's the thing? Well, the National Plan of Bilingualism is not considering those two, but it's staying with uh, pure utilitarian dimension. What is utilitarian? That is to say that for the government and for the development of the country, we pretty much care only for what I can do with knowing English in terms of economy, in terms of pretty much money. Right? This is not big news, right? But the fact that we have a national plan for bilingualism and do not try to have like all of the dimensions that surround language is quite, it's quite well, sad, it's quite preposterous, right? um and then now we have that that for that reason um we don't really have any other accepted conceptions or perceptions of other foreign languages in the one hand, but on the other hand, of the local languages that we have, right? we are just not including what we understand about other languages and how we understand them, considering that our nation has decently rich uh, variety of languages that are spoken here among indigenous and Creole and some that were brought in by immigrants and so on and so forth. So the fact that we're limiting language to an utilitarian dimension is also supposing that those other languages have no value at all. So that's what the instrumentalization of language learning talks about, you know, in general terms. Again, I keep telling you that. If you want to deepen on that, you can just go to the article. But these are the main features that I consider were worth um, sharing. The third moment in this article is called the stratification of languages and cultures. And also we also see some concepts that we have already seen before, that are that the majority language has um, a prestige, and we are marginalizing minority ethnic groups and their languages, with something with that we studied with De Mejia, right? Um, and that goes along with an evident affiliation with a utilitarian conception of languages, right? I mean, the prestige that I have with English is that, well, you can go, you can make business with that, right? All companies are looking for professionals who speak English right now, and if you don't speak English, then you can have. I mean, I believe we have all heard that at some point in our lives. Um, and you can have all of the degrees that you want, but if you don't speak English, then your opportunities uh, are not the same, right? And well, that is just not coping with the idea that we have about being bilingual, and how much worth there is in being bilingual. Um, if we just focus on the the amount of money or the benefits that I can have in terms of my socioeconomical status, I am not considering things like the for example, the positive impact that knowing two languages has for our uh, cognitive functions, just to give you an example, right? And in that way, we are just demeaning um, other languages. There's also a very interesting point right here, and it's that, well, the National Plan of Bilingualism is aimed for schools. We have a very significant part of the population right there. Those are the children, right? And well, their education is pretty much conceived and aimed for an economic and utilitarian future only. It seems like within the National Plan of Bilingualism and education in general, if you think about how um, we have a very marked um, like focus on um, educating for work and like entrepreneurship and all of these things that you ask eighth graders, but that's a whole other story. Um, but within the National Plan of Bilingualism, we see that the only value that comes from learning English is that at some point, um, I mean, they won't have to learn it in the future, and they will be able to do something with their lives, and again, go up in the socioeconomical um, the socioeconomical strata, right? So we're not thinking uh, in that children, we're not thinking that the children need to express themselves, be themselves, and just, we're just not seeing um, them as a as learners as a whole, but we're just aiming for a very particular type of learning, the one that at some point contributes to the society. Okay, and the last moment is called the standardization and marketization of foreign language teaching and learning. So, with all of the ideas that we had about how our country needs to adjust to and to be aligned with the international community and the trends that are currently going on with foreign languages and all the thing and the whole um, emphasis that we have on the common European framework of reference for languages. We have seen a huge boom. Okay, the author doesn't use the word boom, but I thought it would catch on. um, in the number of um, schools and like languages centers and other kind of institutes that um, make a business of the maiden need in the population of learning and certifying their English and other languages, but pretty much for the most part English, right? Because there is a lack of trust on teachers, universities, and schools. It appears, it seems that we look like we're not capable enough to carry out um, language learning um, programs for some reason. Um, so, as I said, that created need or made need for standardization, resulted in a language learning and testing business. Um, I don't know if any of you works in a place where that's the business. I'm not saying that's wrong, of course. I mean, that's um, those places are also are contributing to the realm of second language acquisition and so on and so forth. But I mean, if we see it from that perspective, I mean, we are not facing a humanitarian um, uh, let's say objectives, but more of a business. It's just purely about making money. That's about it, right? And well, it is the population, the regular Joe, right? The regular you and me, who are just bound to find ways to fulfill the requirements that we have now. Um, you know that in order to get hired at a good place, you're most likely to be asked if you have some sort of certification of your English proficiency, right? You can call it IELTS, you can call it TOEFL, MET examination, whatever, right? Um, it it goes beyond that. I mean, there are places that ask you for a CELTA or a Delta or like a TELF certification, right? Because we are living in a moment, in an era in which we need to have everything certified, and well, we will always come to the same idea, and that is that I can have a TELF certification or a TESOL certification. I can have C2 in my IELTS, and I can have whatever you want in terms of paper, but that does not quite um, mean that I am a good teacher, right? So, I mean, that was pretty much, I mean, again, I really tried to shrink it as much as I could so we could just have a regular conversation, which we just, um, recalling the things that we read and um, prioritize what um, is being acquired in our regular exercise and in our regular teaching practicums. um, so yeah, that'd be it. Please keep taking notes. I need to tell you that I mean, I'm trying to be very, very broad and like, I don't want to say theoretical, but like the idea is that later on, whether in the exam or whatever, I mean, I'm going to ask you about um, like how to apply these elements. Okay, so keep taking notes. Move on to the next um, video, and thank you very much for watching.